Ben had been living alone in a small apartment for almost 6 months. Nothing strange had ever happened. Until one Tuesday night at exact 2:15 a.m., he heard a knock on his front door. Knock, knock. Ben woke up. He checked his phone, 2:15 a.m. He looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. He waited. Then he heard a small boy's voice from the another side. Please open the door. Ben forced. He lived on the fifth floor. There was no children living on his floor. He whispered, Who are you? The boy answered, I'm Lotz. Ben did not open the door. He called the building security. Nobody answered. He tried again. Nothing. Still nothing. The boy knocked again. Knock, knock, please. Ben stepped away from the door. The boy suddenly said, You don't have to be scared. Ben's heart started beating faster. He did not tell the boy he was scared. Then the boy whispered, I can hear you breathing. Ben immediately moved away from the door. The hallway became silent. After a few minutes, Ben looked through the peephole again. Nothing. He finally went back to bed. He thought it was over. But the next morning, he found something outside his apartment. A small pair of wet footprints. They started at his door and continued toward the elevator. The following night, Ben stayed awake. He wanted to know who was doing it. He placed his phone on the chair facing the front door. He started recording at 2:14 a.m. Nothing's happened. 2:15. Knock, knock. Ben looked at the door. The same voice. Please open the door. Ben did not answer. The boy knocked again. Knock, knock. Then he said something different. Ben's blood went cold. The boy knew his name. Ben whispered, How do you know my name? Silent. Then the boy's answer, Because you told me yesterday. Ben stepped backward. I never told you my name, the boy replied. Not yesterday. A pause. The first time? Ben did not sleep that night. In the morning, he watched the recording. At first, everything looked normal. At 2:15, the knocking started. But when Ben heard a boy's voice, he noticed something strange. The video showed the hallway. There was nobody outside, not even a shadow. The door never moved, but the audio clearly recorded, Please open the door. Ben replay it. Then he heard something he had not noticed before. After the boy's voice, there was another voice, a man's voice, very quiet. It said, Don't let him in. Ben stopped the video. He listened again. The voice was definitely there. Ben decided to ask his neighbor Mike about it. Mike lived in apartment 504. Ben showed him the recording. Mike listened. His face changed. Where did you get this? Somebody knocked on my door every night. Mike did not answer. Ben asked, Do you know who he is? Mike looked toward the hallway. Then he said, Does he sound like a little boy? Ben nodded. Mike became pale. He told boy something strange about it. Year earlier, a family had lived in Ben's apartment, a father, a mother, and their 8-year-old son. One night, the boys disappeared. Nobody knew what happened. The family moved away soon afterward. Mike had never heard anything from them again, until Ben started hearing the knocking. Mike saw Ben an old photograph. It was taken in the apartment building. Ben stared at it. There was a family standing in front of the entrance, the father, the mother, and a little boy. Ben pointed at him. That's him. Mike looked confused. You have seen him? Ben nodded. That voice? Mike shook his head. Ben, that voice disappeared more than a year ago, bro. Ben stared at the photograph. Then he noticed something. The boy was wearing a small red jacket, exactly like the jacket he had seen through the peephole the last night. Ben suddenly felt sick. Then his phone rang. It was 2:15 p.m. The screen showed unknown number. He answered. Nobody spoke. Then the boy whispered, "Tonight." A pause. "I will knock 3 times." That night, Ben did not stay alone. Mike came into his apartment. They wait together. 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., nothing. At 2:14 a.m., the light flickered. Mike looked at Ben, then knock. One knock. They both forced knock. Two. Then silent. Mike whispered, "There is only two." Ben stared at the door. A third knock never come. Instead, they heard footsteps running away. Mike opened the door. The hallway was empty. But at the end of the hallway, the elevator doors was slowly closing. Mike ran toward them. Ben followed. Inside the elevator, there was nobody, except for a little red jacket lying on the floor. Mike picked up the jacket. Something fell out of his pocket. The small photograph. It showed the same boy. On the back was a date. October 14. Mike looked at Ben. That is the day he disappeared. Then the elevator door closed. The elevator began moving. Neither of them had pressed a button. The display showed 5, then 4, 3, 2, 1. Then it showed something neither of them had ever seen. B. The elevator stopped. The door opened. There was a dark basement. Mike whispered, "This building does not have a basement." A little boy's voice came from the dark. "You found my jacket." Ben and Mike did not move. "Bring it to me." Mike threw the jacket into the basement. Nothing happened. Then they heard footsteps, slow footsteps, coming toward them. Mike pressed the elevator button. Nothing. The footsteps became louder. Step, step, step. A small shadow appeared in the darkness. Then a boy stepped into the light. It was the boy from the photograph. His clothes were soaked. His face was pale, and his eyes were completely black. Ben could not move. The boy looked at him, then smiled. "You finally opened the door," Ben whispered. "I never opened it." The boy's smile disappeared. He pointed behind Ben. "Yes, you did." Ben turned around. There was a door behind him, a door that had not been there before. It looked exactly like the door to his apartment. Mike grabbed Ben. "Don't open it." But from behind the door, Ben heard his own voice. "Mike." Mike stared at him. Then the voice came again. "Mike, open the door." Mike stepped backward. "That is not you." The boy began laughing. Ben looked at the door. Something was standing behind it. He could see a shadow underneath. Then the shadow slowly bent down, as if someone was crawling toward the bottom of the door. The voice whispered, "That is what knocking on your door." The elevator suddenly opened. Ben and Mike ran inside. The doors closed. The elevator shot upward. Floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, 4. Next. Then the doors opened. They were back in Ben's hallway. Everything looked normal. The boy was gone. The jacket was gone. The basement was gone. Mike looked relieved. Then Ben noticed something. His apartment door was open. He slowly walked toward it. Inside was completely dark. His phone was lying on the floor. The screen was recording. Ben picked it up. The recording showed the hallway from earlier at 2:15 a.m. Someone knocked on the door. Knock, knock. Then a third time, knock. A camera angle changed, and Ben saw himself standing outside his own apartment. Behind him stood the little boy. The boy looked directly into the camera and whispered, "Now it is your turn to knock."